But yeah, he sort of, he always used to have this idea with, you know, credit and that you know, you borrow a bit more money and you get things sorted out and you do things properly. But his motivation was just not there. You know, he had this dreams of setting up a backpacker's place. And I'm not joking that he, in the last 6 weeks before the repossession auctions actually started, you know, he got into trying to work it all out and do things, but literally in the last 2 weeks before the first repossession auction, he done more in that time than he'd probably done in 20 years. He went out to an architect and decided, right, I'm going to get all these plans sorted out. I mean, this is when he's already received a letter saying basically the jig's up. You either refinance with someone else or we're taking the lot. Didn't matter. We're going to have a big run to push and get it on. And the idea was that if he was embroiled in the middle of something, then they'd feel sorry for him and let him continue with these plans. But it was all very odd sort of a way of thinking, because they don't care about all that. They just want the damn money. That's bankers for you, you know. They've got investors they've got to answer to at times, you know. So anyway, he basically went to an architect and got all these plans drawn up and tried to push them through to get them passed before he was bankrupted. And he sat there in the local government, you know, in the city hall sort of thing, saying, I want the whole lot passed or none at all. And they said, well, look, you know, okay, we'll pass one. And they said, we'll pass this one. If that's successful, if you want to go ahead, if people don't have a problem with it, if it all works out with no one complaining about doof music in the middle of the night and all that, then we'll consider your second and your third. And he actually got one passed for the property I'm now sitting on. He had it, and I've seen these plans, and I pulled them out when he was, you know, when we're cleaning the place out. And he got past I think it was 70 bed, I think it was. I can't remember, somewhere between 50 and 100, but I think it was about 70 bed or something like that. Backpackers hostel with a 200-seat restaurant was passed for this place right here to be built pretty much on top of where I am now. He had another one also for the home farm, and he had another one for the last farm he bought. And that last farm he bought was essentially what put his interest through the roof and drove him under really quickly. He intended to sell the 2 houses that he had in the city to pay for that, but he never done it. And that was, you know, what really sped the interest up and finished him. But he was only working a day a week for 6 months on the places in the city, trying to turn one of those into a backpackers hostel. And pretty much he built a lot of stuff without any plans on that, but he would only work 1 day a week for 6 months, and then 6 months he wouldn't touch it at all. And then he might go back for, you know, 2 days a week, and within a week or two he'd be back to 1 day a week for another few months, and then he'd get, you know, there was just no motivation to really get on and get in with those things. But, you know, it was sad that he had a lot of dreams, that he was a chronic one for blooming starting things and never finishing them. He went to build a stone house, and it was only very small. And he got 2 rows up, or like 2 courses of stones up, and then gave up on it. And it was a great thing to trip over in the grass, but that was about all it ever amounted to. He used to have, I'll get onto the hoarding, he used to hoard a lot of stuff here and didn't have a garbage collection service for 12 years. Henceforth, the fact that I could fill 7 bins a week and still have more that I couldn't fit in. I could have done 9.5, 10 bins a week. You know, there was a lot of stuff I had to burn here, a lot of old newspapers and whatnot. But, you know, it wasn't just here. The home farm, there was acres and acres of old vehicles from the 1950s. Now, all these essentially just turned to rust. He was offered money for them, but didn't want to sell them, so they all just turned into rust. You want to talk about hillbillies having junk around their house. He had a couple of random things. Well, it wasn't actually bad around his house as such, but when you walked out the back of his shearing shed and all that, yeah, there was 4, maybe even 5 acres worth of these old vehicles. That's how many old vehicles there was. Yeah, it was. A scrap metal merchant would have had a damn field day, let's put it like that. If he had taken all that in, they would have requested that he have a business name because he would have been taken in commercial quantities. It was like that. But he had to hang on to everything. And it didn't just stop with old vehicles and old machineries. It actually went with wool. He had literally a ton of wool sitting in the shed, and it sat there for years, and it got dust over it, got cobwebs on it, all because the price that he was offered when he went in there at one time was not good enough. So he said, bugger it, you're not having me wool at all. People used to say, what are you going to do with all this wool, Alan? Oh, well, don't need to do anything with it. I don't need to get rid of it. I don't need to... Who says I need to do anything, I don't have to do anything with it. I can just keep letting it sit there. And he used to sometimes say things, I was going to play around with insulation or something, just to shut him up, insulation in the house using the wool, which in actual fact isn't too bad. My parents' house has proper bats that are formed to size, but they're actually wool instead of fiberglass. And they work, believe me, work quite well. And, it's sort of... As a kid, it was like a field day for me, going through all these cars. I could look at them all, I could sit in them and whatnot, and most of them were rust buckets, but there were some that were still watertight, and you'd have old magazines and whatnot in there, and I'd be flicking through the magazines and stuff, and a lot of them didn't have engines, but there were a few that did, and there was even a ute there that my father technically owned, when the repossession auction came, there were some of these things, that were sold for $10, $15, some antiques, some interesting things. About the biggest price was a few engines that got taken out of vehicles and were still in a shed. They got about $50 each. But when he got hold of, through some legal channels, all the papers on what got sold for what, the highest sold thing was $100, and there was a car that he had that he'd bought only just before he got repossessed. It needed a carburettor, but it was an entire car that is sort of considered a classic now, and except for the carburettor, and it sold for peanuts, and that really aggravated him, sort of thing. But yeah, he was. It was very different in his thinking, brilliant with people. And at the end of it all, he died at age 62, and he had had enough of all the conspiracy theory stuff. They'd always tell him, we're on the verge of a legal breakthrough, and he'd just say, I've heard all that before, sort of thing. And one of them, he said, we're on the verge of it, it's a big thing. Oh, well, what is it? I can't tell you. Because he hadn't been hanging around with them enough, that it was all secret. And he said, bloody hell, I know those blokes for 8 years or whatever, and no, it's a big secret. And he said, I'm sick of hearing this. They're always on the verge of a big breakthrough. He said, they're never going to be on a breakthrough. I've been hearing it for 8 years. But at the end of all that, he ended up going out and looking at a lot of beach, going on day trips to these different beaches. And he said, you know what, I just want to spend the rest of my life having a look at all these lovely beaches and all this scenery. And by the time he started doing that, he was dead only 3 months later. But yeah.